There was something really...
Young age, I got a sense of the contradiction of that, and that I think, if it was plonked in front of the camera and did what everyone else did, there was something that came through the screen with him, and there was a kind of a drive and it's quite contradictory thing. Through the place, will come to the human kid.
And funny. There was something really scary about the laugh, was there?
And the just all in what I'm doing. I mean, it wasn't a particularly sort of favourite. When you go to that dark, and to take that inner landscape and make it the outer landscape. And it also, I don't think, would have been true to the spirit of Brian Cluff as well. He was a man of immense complexity and a lot of contradictions. But when you mention the name Brian Cluff to people now, the first thing they do is smile and then tell their favourite Brian Cluff story or their favourite quote. And it just didn't seem right to not bring that spirit into what we were doing. So that darkness that's in Peach's novel is all in what I'm doing. I mean, it wasn't a particularly comfortable experience being Brian Cluff, because there was that obsessiveness and that kind of determination and drive and insane desire to achieve. It's all in there, but it just comes out very differently when suddenly you're not inside the head, you're actually seeing it from the outside. And also, it would make it very difficult to go on the journey with that character when you're watching it in a film as opposed to reading it in a book.
I mean, it did make me think, I was a child when Brian Clough was on television, but I do remember that adults would laugh about it, that Mike the Odd would do the impersonations, and everybody at school used to do old Derby County, But actually, he used to terrify me. There was something really scary about him, and I could never quite, until I see this characterisation now, quite realise what it was.
But when I was a kid growing up, I didn't know that he was a football manager to begin with. He was just a personality. He was someone who was on the telly a lot. And it was only later that I realised that he was a football manager, and there was something very funny about him, and I could see that adults were kind of, he pushed buttons in people, I could see that, and there was something a little bit frightening about him, I seem to remember, when I was a much younger kid. I see now, I suppose looking back in hindsight and having played him, that I think what I found frightening was his need. He needed something. He wasn't just a man who was plonked in front of the camera and did what everyone else did. There was something that came through the screen with him, and there was a kind of a drive and it's quite contradictory thing. Obviously a desire to be liked, and yet at the same time he said things that people didn't like. And that, I think, even at a young age, I got a sense of the contradiction of that, and that couldn't have been a comfortable place to be. And now having played him, that I guess that's what I've been trying to explore.
In your characterisation of Cluff, there's also an element of moral crusade in that he feels that football is corrupt, and Leeds United are not winning through skill, they're winning through cheating. So I guess that part of it on too.
Again, it's another one of the contradictions. He says, I don't care what the results are, as long as my team plays the game the way it's supposed to be played. I don't think that's wholly true. But, there's something very pure about his vision for the game, and I think these days there's something very pure about his vision for the game. It's wholly true, but there's something very pure about his vision for the game, and I think these days since the introduction of the Premiership, true, but there's something very pure about his vision for the game, and I think these days since the introduction of the Premiership and the sort of corporateness of football, there is something very romantic about his view of football and the sort of corporateness of football. There is something very romantic about his view of football, and there was at the time. And how much of that was myth-making on his part, and how much of it was true, I'm not sure. But I know that he was passionate about it, and he really did believe in the game being played in a particular way. And he managed to marry results with that way of playing as well, which is great. It's another thing that I suppose is there to admire in him.
There's also a bit of a love story between men. I mean, you've got Clough's relationship with Peter Taylor, but you've also got this obsession that he had with Don Revie. Seems to be almost like a father figure obsession.
Yeah, there's a few love stories going on here, I think. I mean, it's a love story between Cluff and Taylor, which is, I guess, a marriage in a way, and then Cluff has the obsession, the sort of the Edith feast of Leeds United, the other woman, the Scarlet Woman, Leeds United and Don Revie, and then that kind of fever breaks, and then he goes back to his wife and asks for forgiveness. It just happens to be Peter Taylor, not Barbara. And I think that's a very real love story, and as complex as any marriage, I think, what was going on between them. And then there's also the love story, the dark love story between him and Maggie, and then the love story between Cluff and Cluff. There's something very, self-destructive and self-involved about Cluff. So there's a lot of love stories going on in the book.
There's quite a lot of management going on too, and I guess there might be a parallel between Tony Blair and the Queen and Brian Cluff. And they're both dealing with systems, aren't they? They're both people trying to do the best they can within overarching systems.
He's not, I mean, Blair wants to be a politician and wants to be Prime Minister. Frost wants to be in the thick of it politically in the entertainment world. Cluff didn't want to be a manager. Cluff wanted to be a football player. Cluff wanted to be the greatest goal scorer Britain had ever known. And management was always second best for him. I've sort of likened him to Brando a bit, as a Britain had ever known. And management was always second best for him. I've sort of likened him to Brando a bit as an actor, in that Brando, for whatever reason, had a very kind of healthy, unhealthy disrespect for what he did, which gave him a kind of insouciance about it. Brando, for whatever reason, had a very kind of healthy, unhealthy disrespect for what he did, which gave him a kind of insouciance about it, a kind of a relaxation and a risk-taking that made him a genius, I suppose. And I think Cluff was the same. If Cluff could have given up management, if someone had said, here's your career back, and you can go out there and score goals on a Saturday, you would have done it like a shot.
And there's bits that you show on the pitch. Is there something different about the way people played football in the 70s?
Nowadays players are paid so much money and the insurance and all that kind of stuff that the whole game is there to stop people being injured, I suppose, whereas in those days it didn't really matter. And there's that really funny, I think it's very funny anyway, in the film bit where Leeds are coming to play Derby and Cluff is so excited about them coming in, he's laying everything out and he puts out a towel and then he puts out an orange and he puts out an ashtray on every player's place, and that made me laugh a lot.
This kind of fictionalising of fact, do you think there's a new genre actually emerging? We've also had biopics, but this is something different.
Yeah, I mean, I always find biopics a bit...
We've also had biopics, but this is something different. Of fact. Do you think there's a fictionalising of fact? Do you think there's a new genre actually?
On every player's place, and that made me laugh a lot.
This kind of fictionalising of fact. Do you think there's a new genre actually emerging? We've also had biopics, but this is something different.
Yeah, I mean, I always find biopics a bit unsatisfying, because in trying to show the whole of someone's life, you miss out the most important bit, which is who are they? Our lives are not just a catalogue of things that we do, and somehow the spirit of the person seems to get lost. Whereas I think what Peter has been doing in these films is look at one particular moment and then let the kind of ripples of that, in terms of how the rest of their life come out of that. There's been a lot of real life dramas, I suppose. I suppose what Peter has done, certainly we felt it when we did The Deal, the first time we did it, that no one had really tried to make a drama out of contemporary political figures. It would always be satirical, there would always be a very strong agenda in it. Whereas to actually tell a drama and ask an audience to accept, it seems weird thinking about it now because we've done it so many times, but then we didn't know whether an audience would accept an actor playing Blair or an actor playing Brown. So there's something new about it, but that's not to say that other people haven't tried to do it before. I think Peter just is very, very good at it.
Michael Sheen and The Damned United is in cinemas from March 27th, certificate 15. Released on DVD in the next week, winner and
They already have it, night, it's the point, Mike, and today, so it's
is